So they have fiber, they have micronutrients, which are all the different things that you need, the multivitamins that you need to be healthy and to thrive. And so beans have their own day. Beans, peas, and lentils, or pulses, they have their own day because they're so brilliant.
We're very protein aware now. And of course, fiber is the next frontier in our nutrition that we need to address.
The bed that you lay for all of those microorganisms to grow and be healthy. And sometimes when that happens, you do get some bubbles. It ferments. And that sometimes comes out as gas. And that's because your fiber is fermenting, your gut is working. And so it's actually a good thing. One of my friends, she talks about, the party in your pants is actually a good thing. The New York Times declared beans on the menu the standout food trend of 2025.
Now, you talked about your children. So did they ever give you any trouble eating beans?
And whenever they saw the pot on the stove, they would say, I'm going out for dinner. I'm going to my boyfriend's. I'm going to my partner's house. I don't need dinner tonight, because they knew I was soaking beans.
Welcome to In Good Taste, the weekly podcast on food matters for food lovers, with me, Malika Basu, writer, commentator, and advisor. Now, you may have been seeing beans being mentioned a lot around you. Now, for some of us, we eat beans, pulses, lentils quite regularly. We may have dal, we may have rice and peas, we may have some delicious curries. But for others, it's a bit like, oh, not sure about these things. They're a bit uncomfortable in the tummy. They make me gassy. They make my tummy ache. But what is the big deal about beans, and why should we all be eating twice as much as we do already? I'm joined today by none other than Paul Newnham. Now, Paul heads up the SDG2 Advocacy Hub of the UN. Now, that stands for Sustainable Development Goals. And number 2 is all about ending hunger, achieving food security, and also improving our nutrition, promoting sustainable agriculture by 2030. So this is all part of the UN's movement and moves to make the world a more sustainable place. Paul has been traveling around the world with an amazing campaign called Beans is How, making beans more fun, cool, and accessible and interesting to us. So I'm joined by him here today, and he's going to explain why there's such a super ingredient and why we should all be loving our beans. Hello, Paul. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you for having me. It's so exciting to be chatting.
Well, I'm delighted that we are able to continue the conversation that started at the Bean Summit. I mean, who knew? Who knew that beans needed a summit?
It was amazing. I remember we bumped into each other right in the garden there, and it was like straight away, bang, bang, bang. It was good. And there was so much excitement in the room, and a lot of people that are fans of beans.
And it was great to see, to be honest, because, of course, I'm Indian, as you know, and you can tell. And I know you have lots of friends in India and you went to boarding school there. So we eat beans quite regularly. And if I'm honest with you, I was quite surprised to discover that pulses had a day. So, why do we have a whole day dedicated to pulses, Paul?
Well, look, firstly, what is a pulse? Like, some people don't even know what the word pulse is. In India, you do, obviously, but some people get confused. They go, is that something we buy at the chemist? Is that something I take on my wrist? But pulses is a technical definition for dry beans, peas, and lentils. And that's the best way to describe it. So it's this family of what I loosely call beans, but it's also peas and lentils. And there is a day, because these are amazing crops. These crops, they grow in the soil, and they actually create nitrogen. So they have a bacteria that is attached to the root, and that helps to provide nitrogen, which is essential for growing. And so I plant a lot of beans alongside my other plants in the garden to actually improve the soil. They also use less water. And they're also amazing for you. So they have fiber, they have micronutrients, which are all the different things that you need, the multivitamins that you need to be healthy and to thrive. And so beans have their own day. Beans, peas, and lentils, or pulses, they have their own day because They're so brilliant. And so we want people to eat more. And it's so important. And that's part of what the Bean Summit that we met at was about as well, is about saying in the UK, how can we get more people eating this amazing food group?
Now, it's a good place to start, obviously, defining what pulses are and then how beans link. I think beans is often used as a bit of a catch-all, isn't it, to
Exactly.
cover those things because I suppose it has most global resonance. Would you agree?
I would say so. I mean, there's different cultures around the world that have different appreciations. So you will get the word legume used as well, and that's a kind of challenging word. But there's legumes and pulses, and particularly in places like Spain, you'll have like legumes used a little bit more. Pulses maybe in India a little bit more, but generally around the world, people know them by the groups of the ingredient within. So beans, peas, lentils, and in the UK, I would say a lot of people have beans. They would probably start there, or peas. Lentils is more associated with different cuisines and different types of food. So Middle Eastern food, Indian food, where they would, and then there's also chickpeas, which they would see separate to the peas, which is kind of but they're actually in the same family. So there's these like different, it's this big diverse family of foods, and I loosely call them beans.
That sounds perfectly sensible. So let's just go with beans, shall we? What should we do? Should we just call this a beanie podcast?
Yeah, of course. Let's do it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Now, I'm going to pick apart some of those top line things that you mentioned. So nitrogen fixing power, that's a bit of a superpower that beans have, don't they? So why is that important? Can you explain to us in layman's terms?
Yeah. So in order for things to grow in our soil, they need different nutrients. So they need things, just like we need different things to grow. We need carbohydrates, we need fiber, we need protein, we need a whole bunch of nutrients. Plants need the same. And one of the things they need is nitrogen. And nitrogen is often added to soil as a fertilizer. So you add it to soils that are used for farming all the time. So some farmers will plant what they call cover crops. They'll plant beans, peas, or lentils because they help to improve the soil. They break down the soil. They add the nutrients they add this to the soil, and that helps things grow. So beans are pretty amazing because they create their own. And I didn't really realize, and I've done a lot on this. I'm a gardener. But I had a friend, and he pulled out a bean plant and he showed me the roots. And on the roots, there were these little tiny white dots. And I said, "Oh, is that the nitrogen?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, so does the plant grow it?" And he said, "No." He said, "The plant creates a bacteria, and the bacteria creates the nitrogen. It attracts the nitrogen and brings it in." And it's like some scientific process that I'm sure botanists can explain to you. Maybe you can have a botanist on your show. But to me, this is a superpower because what it does is it feeds itself. So it's a plant that you don't have to add a lot. So if you're doing organic farming, if you're really trying not to add a lot of fertilizer to your garden, beans, peas, and lentils can be a great source of improving that soil. And soil is the foundation for all food. It's the foundation for everything, the flavor, the terroir, which is like where it comes from. All of those things come from soil. And so if you've got good soil, you're going to have better food.
You explained that so well because, of course, there's more growing awareness of the fact that our soil is very degraded, isn't it?
Exactly.
And one of the things that I have discovered in my writing is that growing beans is in fact quite historic. Some of the oldest farming systems integrated beans into the way plants were grown and crops were grown so they could have a symbiotic relationship, like the Milpa sisters system, for instance. So we all need to be aware of this, whether we're farmers or not, I suppose.
So I mean, in Mexico, the Three Sisters, which is similar system, where they grow a complete diet essentially. So they have corn, they have beans, and they have squash. And the beans climb up the corn, and they provide the nitrogen for the corn. and then the squash covers the ground and it stops the sun and stops the drying the soil out. And so these three things grow symbiotically together. But when you put them together also on a plate, they're a complete meal. They give you everything you need. You get the whole grain, you get all of the protein, all of the fiber, all of the nutrients you need. And so this is part of how, our grandparents used to eat. This is part of how many cultures around the world have learned to grow food to actually meet the needs. And we've separated some of that and lost a little bit of that knowledge. And I think it's about how do we discover it?
We're going to come on to that in a minute, actually, because this is very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the protein and fiber thing, because we're very protein aware now. And of course, fiber is the next frontier in our nutrition that we need to address. These little beans are packed with those things, aren't they? And they provide a very effective alternative to, say, reaching for meats or, seafood or fish quite naturally.
Yeah.
Is that right?
No. So often we're quite obsessed often with protein, particularly North America is very obsessed with protein, but the rest of the world, everyone thinks protein is essential, and it is essential. The reality is, though, that if you talk to most nutritionists, there's not a challenge in parts of Europe and North America with people not getting enough protein. People have plenty of protein, and protein is something you can't store in your body. I recently had a conversation with a professor, Christopher Gardner, who's at Stanford, and he explained to me, he said, what happens is any excess protein gets turned to carbohydrates. And so people that are just on protein diets, they end up creating carbohydrates through the excess protein because you can't store it. Whereas carbohydrates you can store as fat, but you can't store protein in any way except as fat. So you end up, if you just obsess on protein, you're actually creating fat because you can't use that in your body. It's a whole nother conversation, a whole nother podcast. But
this is more like a glass of wine in a pub situation now.
It's fascinating. I have a podcast, and I actually just interviewed him, and it's coming out soon actually, and my producer was like saying to me, he goes, I was so fascinated, and he doesn't think about this stuff, and he's like, I learned so much about it, and I didn't realize, and I just used to think I just have to have all this protein. And you do need protein, and there's parts of the world where people don't get enough. And so it is really important. But one of the things that most of people in North America and Europe that aren't getting enough of is fiber. And fiber is the foundation for our gut. So, we talk about our microbiome often, and we talk about gut health, and that gut health needs fiber. Fiber is almost like the bed that you lay for all of those microorganisms to grow and be healthy. And sometimes when that happens, you do get some bubbles. It ferments. And that sometimes comes out as gas. And that's because your fiber is fermenting, your gut is working. And so it's actually a good thing. So, one of my friends, she talks about, the party in your pants is actually a good thing. If you see a bit of gas coming and some noise, that's actually not a bad thing. It means that the fiber's working. But that also neutralizes if you've got enough fiber in your diet, your body will be used to it. Often you get reactions because you inject that fiber in, and you all of a sudden need a whole bunch of whole grains or a whole bunch of fiber, and your body's not used to it, because it's been just eating, proteins and other things. And so it's really important. And so, I'm not a nutritionist, but if you talk to lots of nutritionists, you talk to lots of longevity experts, they will all talk about beans as one thing that you can eat with whole grains, and it's almost the best thing you could eat. There's no downside.
You make a very strong case, Paul, obviously, and you've been doing this for a while now. A couple of things to unpack there is that I think your podcast is excellent, actually. I've been listening to it, and I really enjoyed Moyo Odinfar's recent one, because she spoke so well about the challenge with African food versus the cuisine of Africa. And of course, with a lot of these cultures, beans have been very much a part of underpinning our food for, centuries and generations. So it's hilarious because I will have friends in India go, what is all this beans, beans, beans? Yeah. Like, why is everyone going crazy about beans? But then I meet people here in the UK who are just like, oh, wouldn't touch that stuff. That's just gas in the belly. So you described that incredibly well as why that's important. And actually, it's not about the what, it's not the beans, it's more about how you introduce them and enjoy them.
Exactly. And so that, I mean, a lot, I was talking about this, the way we get beans are, often in a jar or a can, or, some people use dry beans, not as many, but some people do, but people are busy. And so I was like saying, you almost need like different sizes that you can kind of go on a 2-week introduction where you start with a small can, then a bigger one, then a small jar, and then you sort of go through, because people open the one size and they think, oh, I've got to eat all this, and then all of a sudden their body reacts. So if you're thinking about getting more beans, peas, and lentils in your diet, I would encourage you to think about how you can add small quantities more regularly, build that up. And as you build that up, you'll find your body starts to react better to that if you have a negative reaction.
That's a great tip. And you've kind of jumped a few steps because I was going to ask you for some of your top tips, which we will come back to.
Okay.
The third,
yeah, you wanted to talk about the cultural point.
Yes, the third thing to say, which also you've touched on, is the affordability and availability of them, because they're cheap. Our household budgets are under so much pressure, and I just love them. They're like a really easy meal if you have a tin of chickpeas or a jar of, beans sitting around, and you know what to do with them. Like, it's just so easy to whip up and affordable as well.
Exactly. I mean, it's really important to be able to find these kinds of ways to keep costs down as things are going up. Packet sizes are getting smaller, costs are going higher. So we have to be thinking about this because, we all don't budget, wages aren't keeping up with, the costs increases. I was making some pasta last night and, we had a little bit of beef mince, but it was only a small amount. And then I put in a tin of lentils and, no one even knew there were lentils there. But these kinds of things, I think they make things stretch. They make them, but not only do they make them stretch, they also add all this bonus. So you're also getting more fiber, you're getting another veg in, you're getting a lot more. And so this is also for parents out there or people that are on, health kicks. This is a way to actually really stretch, save money, but also do this. And cultures around the world have done this for many years. Often, though, the challenge has been that people perceive this as poor food or cheap food or something, and so they feel we need to eat other things, and the reality is that some of these basic kind of food groups and these beautiful dishes are the most exquisite, and people are starting to discover that all around the world. And so there's cuisines that have known this for many years, and they're built around using this diversity of ingredients, and people are healthier, farming systems work better. So to me, I think we've got to start to rediscover some of these lessons that have been learned or forgot. Like they've been learned over years, but then forgotten very quickly as people have moved and challenges of convenience have come in and made it, our lives so busy.
That was very relatable what you were just talking about, because culturally, I will buy a little bit of meat and then find ways to stretch it. And it's just the way we were brought up and what we learned when we learned to cook. So, it makes complete sense, doesn't it? And then you're adding an ingredient that actually brings so much good in. I would love to now talk about something else you've briefly touched on, which is that why we need a campaign to actually make beans more popular and stop them from slipping off our plates. Because the Beans is How campaign is a big global one, isn't it? That's doing incredibly well.
Yeah. So Beans is How is a campaign that has been running for the last 3 years. around the world, and it came out of a conversation that happened during the United Nations Food System Summit, where we were talking about all of the things that need to happen, the big challenges, the big changes around what we eat and how we produce what we eat, and it can get overwhelming. And so we're in this conversation, and there was a chef that came on, a guy called Sam Cass, and Sam used to be the Obama's chef, so he was the White House chef. And he, during the first term of the Obamas, was the White House chef. Second term, he ran food policy for the Obamas. And so he got on the call and he goes, and there were a lot of other people on this call. I was chairing, and there were a lot of business leaders and different. And Sam's a friend, and he gets on and he goes, I think we should just eat more beans. And I'm like, what? What is going on? And a few people giggled, and we said, Sam, explain. And Sam goes, well, we have to change the system. And the one thing that we can eat, more of with no regrets, we can grow more of, that will impact all kinds of things, that's affordable, it's accessible, is beans, peas, and lentils. And he said, if we just got people eating more of that, that would help us diversify our food system, that would improve soil, farming systems, that would use less water, it would increase nutrition, and it would be more accessible. And so we started talking about that and started going, this is actually a really important idea. But then we started to look at, why are the numbers around beans, peas, and lentils static or going down? Often they're being fed to animals. As people make more money, they feel like they're moving into the middle class. They feel like they should eat more animal proteins. People are eating also more convenient foods, which are made from fewer ingredients. So corn, potatoes, wheat. Yeah, all this kind of stuff. So what people are getting is calories, which are becoming more and more refined and less diverse. And so we started to say, in doing that, they're eating less beans, peas, and lentils and things like that. And so people are growing less. All the ones that are being grown are then being fed to animals. So we started to say, how do we build a campaign that helps to really champion, to drive demand, to make beans sexy again, to get them out there, to celebrate them, and then also look at some of the enabling environments. So the things that make it easier for farmers to grow more, for people to eat more, for people to buy more. And that could be through school meals, right through to, supermarkets, to farming subsidies, all those kinds of things. So we started this campaign, and now we have people around the world. We've seen a number of amazing successes where we've seen people starting to talk about beans, and we're seeing increases in consumption of beans. We're seeing more people eating different types of beans, and we're seeing that continue to grow, but we still have a long way to go.
That all sounds very, very interesting, and I'm wondering where we take the conversation. But what I've noticed is that it's sort of fallen off the diet here, so people don't really know what to do with them. And then they're also not cool and sexy in a way that they should be, because they underpin some of the most exciting cuisines of the world, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So are there any, tell me a little bit more about the campaigns you've seen. One of them that I've come across, which I love, is fava bean flour being trialed in bread. Yeah. So, you just get your bean fix without having to worry about it too much.
Yeah. So there's so many different innovations and I think opportunities. So you can use flours, you can substitute flours. I do that in pizza, in bread. You can add a certain amount of fava bean or other bean-based flours or chickpea flours. Pasta's really good. You can get different types of pasta. Also substituting, as I was talking about, with a bolognese by adding in, so there's all these different elements. So we're looking at all of them. We're looking at how do you increase their beans, peas, and lentils as an ingredient in commonly consumed dishes. And so that's working with caterers, working with restaurants. There's even people using black bean brownies, for example, that are, using black beans, and they make actually a better outcome. And then you're looking at, how you actually just also feature them. So thinking about different companies are showcasing beans in different ways. They're making them delicious. They're they're creating different recipes with them. And so we've created a campaign called Beans on the Menu, which works with restaurants to get beans on the menu over a certain month of the year. We're hoping to do it this coming year in London again. We've done it in New York for a few years, and we've seen in the New York Times declared beans on the menu the standout food trend of 2025. So there's been some successes in the way that this happens, because what people food is very aspirational. People always are like, "Ooh, I saw that on Instagram. I want to try that." Or "I saw somebody made that. My neighbor made that and I want to go home and eat that." Or "I saw this on a TV food is very aspirational. And so you've got to make beans aspirational. We've got to make them attractive and desirable. And so that's part of what we're doing with the campaign, is working with lots of chefs, working with lots of recipe creators to create delicious recipes, to put them out there and to not apologize for them, and to show this is an amazing food. So instead of saying, "Oh, we've only got beans," you say, "Look, we've got this amazing dish here and it's delicious and it tastes great and it's also really good for you." And so there's like a different approach. So we're doing a lot of work on that, in really trying to help people understand how do you drive that forward. And we're partnering with a number of groups, like people like the Food Foundation on this Bang In Some Beans. And it's like, the idea is, how do you just get more beans into the different dishes you eat, but also into the, when you go out, or, in different scenarios like that.
I think you're definitely onto something with the approach there, because I often tell the story of food lovers, their eyes glazing over when you start talking about nitrogen fixing powers. But actually,
100%.
Yeah, that's really what I'm thinking about.
Gardeners like that, but not the food lovers. The food lovers are like, just give me a good dish that looks amazing. Don't talk to me.
Give me something tasty and shut up. Because, of course, there are hundreds of varieties out there. I mean, we're talking about beans as if it's like a small handful of things. But, there's
so many varieties.
Hundreds of varieties. They all bring their own taste profile. And it's easy to just label them as nutty or, earthy or whatever. But they're complex. They're interesting. You can do clever things with them. And I suppose for us, as food lovers, the onus is on us to then embrace them. So if you see them on a menu in a restaurant, the idea is that you might want to actually order the dish, give it a shot, and then potentially bring it back home. So it makes sense to tackle both of those things at the same time. You've got the home cooks with the recipes, exactly. And then, of course, the restaurant food as well.
Yeah, I mean, and a part of it is demystifying it a little bit. Some people say, "Oh, if you don't take dry beans and soak them," and like we're saying, eat beans. We don't care how you get them, where you get them. They can be from a can, a jar, they can be dry, they can be in a dish, they can be a flour. Like, it doesn't matter. The outcome is getting more beans into our diets, into our food system, is the solution. And, there's marginal differences, a little bit more salt in some, or a little bit of this. Overall, eat more.
Sounds great. I've got a bowl of chickpeas in my fridge at the moment, which I'm quite pleased about, because now I'm super craving beans. Obviously, this is a bit of an occupational hazard. You travel all around the world, and you must come across so many preparations. I know you talked about black bean brownie, but have you come across some really delicious things? So let's talk a little bit about what you like to eat, Paul.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I have an absolute gift in terms of being able to meet with lots of chefs around the world, with lots of food lovers, and to be able to explore food in so many different cultures around the world. And people often ask, "What's your favorite?" And it's really hard, because you go, "Well, I have a favorite here when I go to this place, or I have a favorite in this country." And then somebody goes, "Here, try this," and you're like, "Oh man, how'd you do that?" And so I like simple things. So, like a pasta fagioli with the Italian kind of dish with a borlotti bean, that's cooked in, very simple To me, those kinds of dishes are just very hearty, and they're very, like, we often will eat them around the table. But then you also go into different pestos, which you can make in different ways, utilizing different ingredients and different beans, peas, and lentils to other dishes that, we have an amazing bean burger that is a family favorite, and it's made with black beans. It's by the Bosch Boys, who you may know, but it uses sweet potato, brown rice, and black beans. And our kids love it. Like, it holds together beautifully, cooks on the barbecue, the flavor
Wow.
amazing. And so we eat that all the time. There's chilies. They also do a great chili that they use. The secret ingredient is a little a little square of chocolate.
Oh.
It's really, I don't know, it really adds something that's unique. So, I mean, we do a lot of that kind of cooking when we're at home. And lots of, Texas style beans, cooked in a, cast iron, fire, that kind of feel. And then lots of like lentil based dishes that have lots of veg in them, and just really hearty and, kind of great for a winter's night. And then, in summer, it's, you go to lots of fresh beans, and in different shapes and sizes. I've got a reasonably large garden, and I live in Australia, so it's summer at the moment. And so there's a lot of beans out there in the garden. And so it's starting to, utilize them in different ways, fry them in a pan with a little bit of sea salt, put the bit of chili with them, and some olive oil, just very simple preparations
That all sounds absolutely delicious. I mean, what are we talking here? Twice a week, if people could replace what they're eating or add a few more beans and give us a little.
I would say double it. So whatever you're eating, eat more, so it really, if you're eating them twice a week, eat them 4 times a week. So we have, in from our supermarkets, very small tins, and we often add them as salad toppers. We'll add bigger tins into different family pots of different dishes. And so it's just a way of just thinking always, can I add some beans to this? Can I bang in some beans? Is there a way to add some lentils or get some peas in here, and I think if you keep thinking that way, like breakfast, smash peas on toast instead of avocado, amazing. You've got a serving already, so there's so many ways you can do this. And so, I would say just think about how many times a week you eat them and then see if you can double it.
That is a very doable top tip right there, Paul. Now, you talked about your children. I believe they might be quite grown up now already.
They're old, but they live at home. So they're grown up, but they all live at home. And my youngest is actually a first-year apprentice chef, so he's always playing in the kitchen. And then the others are quite accomplished in their cooking as well in different ways. So. Yeah.
This is amazing. So did they ever give you any trouble eating beans? Because I know for a lot of family,
lots of issues eating beans. So I have a big pot, an orange pot. I like orange. We have this big pot. And whenever they saw the pot on the stove, they would say, I'm going out for dinner. I'm going to my boyfriend's. I'm going to my partner's house. I don't need dinner tonight, because they knew I was soaking beans. And now it's become a kind of family joke. They actually really like the dishes that I cook, but I still have a few struggles with one of them. But generally speaking, they've completely come round and starting to see the value of Dad's bean obsession.
So guys, don't lose hope if you're listening and you have little people around.
Little
don't lose
people
hope.
are easier, I reckon. I think little people make some muffins, black bean muffins, and make some different things. You can just change out the pasta, put it into your bolognese. They will have no idea.
I think this is fantastic. Well, Paul, you've been amazing to chat to. Thank you so much for coming along.
No, an absolute pleasure. It's great to be able to chat to you, and we need to get together and do some cooking one day.
I would absolutely love that. You're now speaking my language. So thank you, and good luck with the rest of the Beanspiration.
Thank you so much, and enjoy those chickpeas later today.
I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends about us, and I'll see you here for the next one. Bye.